All right, so we've got a few folks joining now. Welcome everybody. We're just going to give everybody a few minutes just to get logged in and set up. We'll be back to you in just a wee moment. 2 seconds, guys. Okay, well, look, there was certainly a good turnout for today's event. A lot of registrations, and we can see a very large attendance already. So thank you for everybody who's joining us. Hello to Julie. Hello to Howard and Tony from Resomation. I'll let everybody say a quick introduction themselves. But as you'll have seen from the promotion, you know, a very interesting topic here today, an emerging technology, if I can put it like that. One that personally I'm keen to know a lot more about. There's a lot of questions in my head around the intricacies and how it works and what it is and what it isn't. So I'm sure it'll be a very, very informative session. So if I start, maybe hand over to the guys from Resomation just to say a quick hello and a quick intro.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you to the ICCM and Julie for inviting us to speak today. Looking back at previous webinars that you've run, feel in honoured company from the speakers you've had, so that's excellent. And also a special thank you to the likely attendees from the sector who have obviously made tremendous efforts during this last 12 months of an unprecedented period. So we thank you for that. I'm here, Howard Pickard, MD of Resomation. I'm here with my colleague Tony, project manager for the business, who, when it comes to questions, if they get a little technical, he's the man who knows.
Afternoon, everybody.
Okay, shall I start the slides then?
But please do, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so today what I'm going to do, I'll just move to the, we have about 25-30 minutes, I believe, to just talk through everything about Resomation, which as much as we can. It's difficult to know exactly the level of the audience, of your understanding, so if you are fairly familiar and repeating stuff, I do apologize about that, but I've tried to cover as much as we can. And then afterwards, we will have opportunity for questions, which we would very much welcome. The greater the feedback, the more we learn about people's opinions and thoughts, concerns, etc. So please keep your questions as we go through and answer them once we've finished the presentation. So today what we're going to look at is why we feel Resomation is so relevant to today, particularly in this environment we're in. We're going to understand the process a bit better, so you can see how it might be or might not be applied. Update people on where we are in the rest of the world. It is a process that can and is being of great interest throughout the world. How we're going about engaging with the industry and the regulators and relevant people in the sector, and then how we see the future moving forward. First of all, I just wanted to take a moment to give a bit of background, because Resomation is part of LVVC Group. Now, we purchased, as LVVC Group, purchased Resomation majority shareholding in 2016, having been the designer and manufacturer of Resomation equipment prior to that from 2008. LVVC is actually my family's business, originating as Leeds and Bradford Boiler Company. We have 4 divisions now, and as a business, we are principally involved in the aerospace industry, So you can see the factory here, and how all these are generically very similar to what the Resomation system is. It's called an autoclave, a pressure vessel with a door on. And so we make these for lots of different industries all over the world. So our technologies division makes the autoclaves for aerospace industry, makes submarine hatches, makes other autoclaves for automotive and different sectors there. Also, the foundry process we supply, interestingly enough, is the one that makes the medical implants, which ironically we're involved now in the removal or the end of it, the medical implants life. And all of it is around pressure technology and the technology and the support of equipment in this way. So we have a lot of experience of supplying equipment, supporting customers throughout the world. So Resomation, natural water cremation. So before I get into further detail, I think it's important to just understand how this process is viewed. And some of you will know Professor Douglas Davis from Durham University, and he put it very well by saying, just as British inventive engineering helped save the land for the living in the 20th century UK through flame cremation, so in the 21st century, this innovative water-based process of accommodating human bodies offers new opportunities for an age framed by ecological concerns of land use and air quality. And as equipment technology providers, that's our objective, is to use British inventive engineering to offer a new alternative for end of life. In essence, Resomation returns the body to cremated remains using water instead of flame. That, at a summary level, is in essence what it's about. So why is this important now? I thought this was a great photograph I found of Sir David Attenborough, where nowadays he looks like this because he's saying, you know, I've made enough of this. I think it's over to you guys to now act upon it. And that's what our responsibility, all of our responsibilities, is to do that. And why is it important for the funeral sector? Well, as I say, there's no longer any doubt that we have to take actions to deliver net zero and things of this type. And many councils have declared climate emergencies, where they look at every part of their activities and look at how emissions can be reduced. And many of them have these targets of net zero 2030, 2035, and that's not long away. A presentation by the Environment Agency at a recent environmental stewardship group, which I'll talk a moment about, they were saying how, summary level, to deliver this, it's probably a bit small, but the different categories that they see as being responsible for delivering net zero. And 43% was just generally societal and behavioral changes. And this is where I work on the norms, what people understand, and it's particularly relevant to the funeral sector. So it's now become conspicuous if you're not doing anything about it. In the past, it was a little exception. Oh yeah, I'm dealing with net zero. Oh, are you? But now, why are you not doing that? And we can't get away from the fact that in cremation, there is a problem with emissions. And so it's great to see that the sector, the environmental stewardship group that's set up, where there is great collaboration, starting to be good collaboration on how the sector can deal with this. The FBCA are running seminars, the ICCM events, which again I'll touch on in a second. So these are all big changes that happened in the last couple of years really. And then from the public point of view, there's one aspect is the responsibility of the sector to improve, but the public, they're becoming more vocal about this. And we've seen that very much, that now every week we are getting emails or in contact from members of the public or within the sector. And here are a couple of examples just from last week. One a funeral director and the other a member of the public. And this really shows that people are very conscious of the fact that there needs to be change in this area. So what can be done about it? Now, I attended again an event which Julie was talking at, and apologies, Julie, I've nabbed a couple of your slides here, but they were great suggestions that right from the simple things, the quick wins, the easy wins, all make a difference, right through to the more fundamental but equally important factors that can be taken into account when planning, when everyday thinking of what your facility, your provision is. What we need to do is work on this and respond to this shift in the public attitude, and it will be a two-way thing. So I suggest that you remind visitors to the crematoria, the cemetery, wherever, that you are doing things about this. Remind them of what their responsibility should be. Have they driven when they could have walked, or taken a bicycle or something of that sort? It's just making this happen in everyday life. Unfortunately, which again I will come to, but we can't get away from the fact that the existing methods of cremation and burial have inherent challenges in this, and in the impact on the environment. And although improvements can be made, there still is an impact. So just to put this in perspective of Resomation, and there can be a lot of data that various reports have produced, but this one I feel summarizes it best, and that you have here the impact, overall impact, climate change value on the environment. And you can see the burial, cremation and resomation, and it is a significant difference there. And yes, we can debate those figures, but there's still a step change difference that means that somewhere in the solution for improving the impact on the environment or reducing the impact on the environment, resomation ought to be considered as part of that. On top of that, there are no NOx emissions. Mercury, it doesn't, the mercury basically remains in the teeth and then can be dealt with in a more responsible way, and the amount of energy use is less. We don't see the comment at the bottom here. We don't suggest that a resomation or water cremation will replace flame cremation, not in the near future. But like with electric cars, with fossil fueled cars, it's seen as a solution there that in the early days is there as an alternative, either for those people who want to express their desire to reduce their impact on the environment, or in certain high density areas, say city centres and things like that, for cars, it was an option. And so that's how we see resomation, is that it's an alternative. So the process, for those who aren't familiar at all with equipment, a couple of graphics here, a photograph of equipment in our factory, and then another one just showing how you have a tank system, and then you have a resomation, a resomator. And then with that, you would have a drying oven, which I'll explain further on. But going back to the fundamentals of the process, this is what we all are made up of, the human body. And note, 65% of that is water. Now, when we are created, the building blocks of life, fatty acids, sugars, nucleotides, and amino acids, are dehydrated or zipped together to form what was in the previous slide there, and produces water, and that becomes the human body. All we're doing with this process is reversing that. But because of the temperature, which operates at about 150 degrees C, and the very small 5% amount of alkaline, we're able to do it pretty quickly in about 3.5 to 4 hours. And that, in essence, is what happens in resomation. So it's taking the natural process of the end of life and speeding it up to break it back down to the building blocks that we all began with. So going back to the picture of the equipment, you can see on the left-hand side there, just to explain it a little more clearly, that behind the panel work there, we have a chamber which the body is placed in, and you can see a section view there. So the body is placed in here in a woolen shroud normally, and it's in there that the water, the chemical, and the process occurs all automatically. You start the cycle, and then at the end of the cycle, 3.5 hours later, it's finished. At the end of the cycle, you have bones, very like current flame cremation, but because of the water, they're obviously wet. So they are dried in a drying oven, which is part of the equipment we supply, and then cremulated or processed, how we like to call it, in the usual way, with the same equipment that is currently done, and you end up with ash or remains, just like currently. Now, just to be a little more clear on this, you can, the body can arrive in a coffin, in a cardboard coffin, or in a woolen shroud. Different countries approach this in different ways. So there's not one ideal solution or one standard solution for this. So we offer a combination of ways, depending on how the facility wishes to deal with it. But the body can arrive in a coffin, and then that coffin can be broken down and reclaimed in terms of its wood as part of the values of the process. It certainly wouldn't be reused in that way unless it was a coffin cover or reusable casket, which in the US they do quite a lot. So there are that's why I say there are different solutions for different areas. But in the UK, we would see it, the body arriving in some form of cardboard or coffin that is destroyed then. And so to see it more graphically, this again was the study which I'll talk about shortly, and I hope everyone's okay with these slides. But the body is placed into the resomator in a woolen shroud, and at the end of the cycle, you are left with the bones. And as I said, those bones are processed in much the same way as current, and they are ash, which are placed in an urn and returned to the family or whatever they wish to be done with them. So now that you've got that bit more understanding, just to revisit that slide about the impact, we hope that you understand that the nature of the process and why we feel it's so important that resomation should be part of this solution for dealing with the fundamental issues we talked at the beginning of the environmental impact of the sector, but also the choice for the public in terms of reducing their footprint on the environment. We have been trying to increase awareness throughout the sector. The pandemic and the lockdowns obviously put a stop to that. We hope around July, if we continue to work our way out of this pandemic, that we will be able to start holding those again. But it really does help to come to our facility here in Leeds. We have the equipment. I don't know if some of you can see through the webcam, the factory behind us. We have a number of machines under manufacture pretty much all the time. So you can see how the equipment works, and we get tremendous interest from people when they come to these open days. So if you want to know more than what I'm talking about today, then please don't hesitate to contact us, info@Resomation, call us, whatever. Now, just to say, now update where we are and why hopefully it's imminently happening, or why it hasn't happened yet here in the UK. So from a legal point of view, we had it made very clear to us back in 2010 from the Ministry of Justice that the process is not unlawful, which is the MOJ's way of saying it's lawful, but they don't like to say that, so they say not unlawful. However, they rightly point out that you have to adhere to the required regulations. Now, there's a difference between England and Wales and Scotland here. So in England and Wales, the current Cremation Act does not provide for other forms of disposition. And this was recognised by the Law Commission in December 2017, when they published their 13th programme of law reform and referred to the modern framework for the disposing of the dead, and specifically referred to resomation as a feasible process that needs putting into primary legislation such then that you get the power to regulate. So that's why there aren't specific regulations for resomation yet. There can't be until they change the primary legislation. In Scotland, that's different, because the Burial and Cremation Scotland Act 2016 provided that power to regulate. It acknowledged that there are other ways of disposing of the dead. And so we have been and are currently, obviously a little pause whilst they had their election, but we're in regular communications with the government and the cross-party bereavement group to look at how we can introduce, hopefully fairly soon, resomation into Scotland. However, we have, or not however, we have proven that it's not unlawful. As I touched on a moment ago, and we'll talk more about, we actually performed 5 successful resomations at Sheffield University in April 2019. And the MOJ were fully informed of this. We produced the documents, examples here of Cremation Form 1, how this was amended to accommodate resomation, and that was all accepted. And we performed 5 resomations for the purposes of a study for the water, which I will talk about. Now, we recognize the sensitive nature of this process. It's not something that just go on the high street and do. So we want to do it correctly, and we want to do it properly. We want to engage further with the sector, to work with the trade associations, whoever the relevant stakeholders are, to make sure that it's all done correctly. It's being talked about a code of practice. Perhaps we could do that. Funeral directors are unregulated currently. How long that will last, we'll have to see, but currently unregulated. So there's no reason, the precedent is there, that a process could be ensured that it's done responsibly and correctly through the likes of a code of practice. But the key thing is it's not unlawful. Now, the next area is the water side. People have said, oh, what about hurdles of water? Now, you can't get away, it's a water-based process. So there is a liquid from the process, and that we understand that, we accept that. There's 65% of the body is water. Now, everybody's familiar with the water cycle, the way it works in every country, in every way of life. So how we see this and how we explain it is if the current methods, burial, the water of the body and part of in the way the body breaks down, that inevitably seeps into the watercourse. And we're fully aware that there are issues around that and ways of making that better and always being worked on of improving that. But nevertheless, that's what happens to the water. With cremation, the first thing one has to do is vaporize that water and the body, obviously. Now that goes up into the atmosphere and enters the water cycle that way, and round it goes back into the water cycle as every bit of water does. So with resomation, we just see it as the same. But rather than it going up the stack or seeping out, as with burial, we pass it through a treatment in our system, and then it enters the water drainage system and goes to be treated by the water company. And only then does it enter the water cycle. Now, note, the mercury hasn't left the body, it's all the teeth, it's still there in the equipment. Embalming fluid is broken down as part of the process. And the implants, interestingly, they remain in the equipment. They're very pristine and clean when they come out. So they can be recycled, either recycling metal as in the current system, or perhaps in the future there may be a way of third world countries or countries of that type that we can reuse some of these implants. So overall, when looked at like this, you can see that there's a problem with the water, so to speak, on each of the processes. And it's just a matter of understanding how this works and what the narrative around that. And we're all familiar with the terms of granny going down the drain, well aware of that, but it's only the way it's said, really. If it's turned into a different way, then it can be viewed more positively. So what we did in 2019, April 2019, was when working with the FBCA, we resomated 5 bodies, which families were fully aware of what they were involved in. We worked with the local funeral director, and it was all done very transparently and openly and engaged, as I said, with the FBCA, the MOJ, all done correctly. And in the end, the data was taken by the University of Middlesex, and they produced a report on behalf for Yorkshire Water. And as a result, after much discussion within Yorkshire Water, they concluded that there is no reason not to issue a consent to discharge, which is the way the water companies, the responsibility of the water company is to issue this consent and say, yeah, it's absolutely fine what is being discharged into the system. And this was a very thorough examination, and as part of the test by Middlesex University, they looked for traces of DNA, which they couldn't find in the samples from the 5 resumations that were done. This report has now been circulated to all water companies, and we have consents in Northumberland, in Scotland, we're underway in United Utilities, the Northwest, and in Thames Water as well. And we will be working with our clients to continue these applications. But there's no doubt that the technical evidence is there that there is not a problem, not a technical problem with the liquid that comes from this process. Unfortunately, the water companies do use the term effluent, which again is part of the narrative, but they do not have a concern with the liquid for their treatment systems. So I thought this was quite a good way to finish the water side about the narrative, that if you see it like this is some marketing material that one of our clients has been preparing. When I think about cremation and being burned, I feel uneasy. It's always been a worry of mine. With Resomation, I have no such fear. The thought of water is calming and reassuring. And that is a lot of the feedback from the US, where it is readily available. So looking at the US, it's been used there for well over 5 years. So it's proven technology. This process is happening every day in the US. Thousands of families have selected it. Tony is regularly supporting our customers out there with their equipment. And all the time, new states in the US, it has to be made legal before you can do it, in contrast to the UK. And all the time, people are pushing to have it legislated for in the various states. The latest one being Hawaii, which you can see here, an extract from a online news program just a couple of days ago, where they were talking about how the public are pushing for it. Interestingly, it's having a few hurdles, and it's having hurdles from people within the sector, from vested interests within the sector, which is a real shame. And the people working hard to get it passed are very frustrated in this way. But it will get there. There's no doubt it will get there. In Europe, increasing interest. We expect to have systems in the Netherlands and Ireland by the end of this year. We have a lot of dialogue with Spain and France. There was to be a Funexpo show in Madrid last week, I think, or in a couple of weeks' time. Unfortunately, they've postponed that to September, and they had asked us to send a Resomation system over to have in their display on a funeral home of the future, and that we will do in September now. So it's being seen more and more as a genuine option within this position. So what we have to do is engage all the time. The media, great media. For many years, they've been very critical. That is changing. The stories that are coming out, the Sun, January 21 this year, an awful picture of a flame. It's normally been the other way around. The Bradford Telegraph and Argus, it came out, greener, a crematorium may be used for greener water services. It's far more positive. In Holland, how beautiful and clean can it be? I just thought it was a great headline there. So there's definitely been a turn in the way the media are viewing this. There's a number of research projects going on. Georgina Robinson, I don't know if you've read this paper, but it's a great paper that Georgina has written. I think she might even be on the call today. Particularly the headline, "Dying to Go Green." I think it says it all. And we're engaging a lot with likes of ICCM and other associations, with the government, but it's very slow to make change in this sector. The Environmental Stewardship Group, a great initiative, great initiative. And I think Julie made a very good comment in the launch of that, how it's, I think I refer to it at the end actually, so I won't spoil that one. But more visits, more open days, webinars, this sort of thing. Please, we want to engage, because the more the understanding and the more feedback we get, the better. So who's going to offer Resomation? Who's going to try to address these issues of saving the planet and offering this choice to the public? Well, it's not for us to decide that. We are the equipment manufacturers, suppliers. We will work with whoever wishes to offer it. What I will say is, what our responsibility is to make sure it's done responsibly within the law, to standards, it's managed well, certification, training. We're very happy to support organizations on that and the relevant documentation. And then when users have the equipment, what we do is support people using our equipment throughout the world. So who could offer Resomation? Well, crematoria, obviously, to complement their existing flame cremation and often offer a green alternative. Many people in the States are seeing how it differentiates them from other crematoria. Obviously in the US, it's a little more market forces, and they see this as a good way of differentiating. Woodland natural burial sites, we've had a lot of interest from organizations on this side, because they see that the people who select that have similar values in terms of impact on the environment. Funeral homes, many funeral homes, increasing number, are offering the full service within their home, and it only makes sense if they could offer the disposition perhaps as part of that. But they have to be of a certain capability and manpower, etc., to do it, as I say, responsibly and to approved standards. Interesting one we've had at cemetery chapels. There are a lot of cemetery chapels, we understand, and we've visited a few of them, where the cemeteries, because burial is obviously not as frequent nowadays, that these chapels, a lot of them have become disused. There's actually a great one here in Pudsey, just along the road from us. And so it's being considered this could be opportunity for giving new life to the cemetery chapel. And then obviously the growth in unattended cremation. And this has created a lot of interest in the current flame cremation, which inevitably has spilled over to Resomation. And so there are some people who are saying, let's miss the flame cremation side, we're going to set up a facility directly with Resomation. So there's a lot of interest from all parts of the sector, and it's not for us to decide. And I think in the interests of our fundamental objectives, which is to save the planet, to bring emissions down and offer that choice to the public, that it should be whoever is able to do it responsibly and correctly. And we're near the end. I won't spend too much time on this, but honestly, Professor Douglas Davis is a great guy, and he did a fantastic presentation at the CBC event 2019, and just I'm nowhere near as eloquent and as learned as him. And so he was talking about the elements of earth, fire and water. He said air, but you can't see air, was his explanation there. So and then in periods in time, the Reformation was all about individuals and saving souls. The Industrial Revolution, all about masters, workers and the factory and making a profit. He says we're now in the ecological revolution, and it's all about science versus politics. Look how the whole COVID thing, it's really changed the debate there, and it's all about what the scientists say. And now the key thing, what we're relevant here, is saving the planet. And so it's all about ecology now. And finally, change. It's a difficult thing for any organization. It's a difficult thing, but where you are, the funeral sector, where they are taking on such a responsibility for bereaved, we understand it's not easy. And I put here just a slide example of the adoption of heat exchangers in crematoria. When I first got involved in this sector, I heard about this, and it was a very difficult facility to start with, very difficult option, because the media got hold of it and made a big thing of heating. I think it was one in Redditch, the swimming pool, and yet the science was there, the logic was there, and in time you can see how it gets adopted, and I think the numbers are even higher now. So we understand it will take time, but we feel now the environmental side argument is so strong that it has to be considered. Otherwise, the public are going to really get very demanding about it. So, to finish, we see Resomation as having a place in disposition to complement existing technologies. It has to have a part to play in reducing the emissions of disposition. Somewhere has to have a part to play. Now is the time for the industry to come together and address the climate change. This is Julie's quote, heralds a new era of cooperation in the sector. And I think that's so important, and I hope she's right. And at that launch event, the environmental stewardship, this guy from the Environment Agency, again, I thought put it very well. In a sector with a degree of sensitivity around cultural change, the court of public opinion is changing fast. Sustainability and environmental issues at the forefront of market change. Those who rise to this challenge will be at the forefront of market advantage. Those who lag behind will be at significant disadvantage. So thank you all very much. I've probably gone a little over my time, but I hope you found that informative.
Awesome, Howard. Thank you very much indeed. That was very good. And I, speaking for myself, I personally learned a lot there, and I'm sure there's a number of folks on the session today that feel similar. You certainly spiked a lot of interest. We've got some questions, some comments here, and I'm going to relay those to you guys in good time. But Julie, maybe firstly, a few words from yourself.
Yes, thank you, Howard. Really useful to have that refresher and update. I have visited your factory and was incredibly impressed by the engineering side of things. Lots of really nice shiny things that I got very distracted by, but really impressive. And I'd recommend to anyone, if they do want to go and visit, you'd be made very welcome by Howard and his team. And it's definitely worth having a look, because it helps answer some of the questions, I think. So really great, thank you. And it's good to hear about the water as well, because I think last time we spoke, there were some issues with Yorkshire Water still. So it's great that they've they have now decided that there's no issues. So yeah, brilliant to hear that. Thank you. I think there are quite a few questions, Neil. So rather than me going on too much, should we go to the questions and get those answered?
Yeah, let's do that. There's some in the Q&A, there's some in the chat. Let's go to the chat first. So Lee Williams, thank you for that. And Julie mentions water just there, so it's a good lead in. So Lee asks, what happens to the soft tissues dissolved into the alkaline solution? And other than the bone remains, what are the other waste products? She then goes on, how green is the disposal of the alkaline solution? So there's a couple there for you guys.
Okay, thank you for those. So what happens with the soft tissues dissolved into the alkaline solution? Well, they dissolve into solution, because as I showed in that slide of the basic chemistry, is that the cycle, what it does is it breaks down those tissues into their constituent elements. I could show you pictures of the liquid, but I think that's inappropriate, but if on a one-to-one, I would happily do that. But in essence, it is a liquid, the soft tissue. There are no physical solids.
Yeah.
Well done, Tony. No solids within the liquid. It is just liquid. So there's bone and implants remaining in the equipment. The rest is just liquid. So that's that one. How green is the disposition of the alkaline solution? Yeah, disposal. Well, again, it's a very mild form of alkaline. You know, there's alkaline in bleach, there's alkaline in hair shampoo, I think, and various products. And what our equipment does is it's designed that at the end of the process, the alkaline has been used, so to speak, to break down the body. So when the liquid is collected by us, by our equipment at the end, it has a pH of around 11, 10.5, 11, something like that. So we actually treat that before, because water companies will stipulate something like 10 or 9.5, and we will treat that such that it brings it down to that pH, and then it goes into the system. And so they're not having to specifically dispose of alkaline solution in any other way than what goes into the drainage systems.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Howard. Lee says thank you for that. So let me see here. So we've got a couple on the commercial side. So we've got one from Steve Whiteley, another from Brent Stevenson. So what is the cost compared with the flame cremation? It's limited to two to three per day. So that's from Steve first.
Okay, so I'm going to get Tony involved in this because he hasn't spoken yet. So.
So the cost of the process itself is very similar to flame. Most people who are using our systems tend to offer it at the same price, although they could offer it at a premium with it being a green process. People have chosen not to do that, just to keep it on an even playing field. So it's a very similar cost that people are offered, but we're not here to set the price of that process. That's up to the individuals to do so. But our current users tend to set the same price, whether that's flame or water cremation.
And the second part, in terms of 2 to 3 per day, that's right, because we said about 4 hours for a cycle. But our users in the States, because there's no flame involved and the risks associated with that, they tend to run it into the night. So they will start a cycle in the evening and come back in the morning when it obviously finishes in the night, but they can leave it there in that state, and then they come in the morning. So generally they get 3 or 4 per day.
Okay, thank you very much. And then Brent Stevenson, he asked a similar question, but there's another part to his question. Don't know if you're able and even willing to get to the specifics of this in today's session. The cost of a full system installed, so the price from you guys to the operator, what does that tend to look like?
So if I just give, as you say, it's probably not appropriate to give any, or I'm only going to be able to give you generic things. So if we say 350 to 400,000 pounds is the whole system all in, that's a guide that we use. In terms of how much does each cremation cost in energy, as Tony says, you know, the all-in cost is similar to the all-in cost is similar to flame, slightly less, depends what you pay for various things, but the amount of energy is obviously less. I think 7 times less energy is what is said.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, guys. There's certainly a few coming in, and I'll just keep getting these out to you guys, and you can keep batting them back at us. So we've got Ken West here. Howard suggests that resomation will not replace cremation, and it will just be another option. Why do you say that? And yeah,
okay, well, I believe that's Ken from the founder or the whatever the title might be of Natural Burial, and I would love to meet Ken. I'd love to welcome him here, because the experience I suggest he had in the early days with Natural Burial, you don't know how well it's going to be adopted or not. And so, you know, we don't want to, it's not appropriate for us to say this is going to replace flame cremation. I have no idea. So we just want people to see it as an option. That's why we say it. If the public and the profession decide that this is a better way and it does grow such that it replaces, well, we're not obviously going to stop that. Have a bit of a production problem to start with, I think, but it's not for us to say that. So that's my reasoning, Ken.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. With still more coming in. Okay, so Eon, I thank you very much for the presentation. How does the efficiency compare to flame cremation? You've covered that. I've heard that resomation can be a complete two full process in a day, while flame cremation completes in 5. Please can you confirm? Okay, so I think you guys covered that off when you talked around running through the night. So.
Again, what I would just add to that is flame cremation, when it first started, the cycles were longer. And, you know, it's only through experience, through knowledge and the development of technology, which is where I would say we do our best. We do well with that in technology. So we look forward to, and we're already working on ways that we can make the systems more efficient, way we can reduce those cycles. And all the time, that's what we like doing. So I'm confident in time, we will reduce those cycles, as has happened with flame cremation, and make them more efficient.
Brilliant, thank you. They're coming in thick and fast, guys. You're really in the hot seat today. Graham Harrison, where are you currently at with installation inside the UK?
Well, $1 million question. We like to feel we're getting closer. Being involved in events like this is great because we can have that feedback. We would like to think this year we might have an installation, but there is just issues we have to work through. The pandemic has definitely set us back, understandably. We have no issue with that. The priorities of the sector were clearly on that. So that's set us back, but we would be hopeful this year, if not early next year. It's going to be in Holland very early next year, Ireland probably later this year. So, you know, we want the UK to be there. I hope the UK want to be there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got a couple here. One from Vanessa Spencer. How much electricity is used in the process, and how is this electricity produced?
So for the main consumption of the system is the electric steam generator that we use. That uses about 130 kilowatt hours of energy over the whole period, and it's produced dependent on where the facility is in the world and what their supply actually is to that building. It could be provided by renewables if they have the infrastructure for that, and that's something we do talk about at the point of sale. But ultimately, it's down to the end user where they get that power from. And we, as Howard's already mentioned there, we are looking at ways of reducing that through development of different systems, different heating systems, and different technologies to bring the overall process time down, but also bring down the energy usage as well.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Tony. One from Neen Valley Crematorium. Have you put a request in with Anglian Water, and if so, how is that one progressing?
We haven't currently put one in with Anglian Water. We would be more than pleased to put one in with Anglian Water. I think you guys, unfortunately, are not on the drainage system there, but we nevertheless could still put an application in. Just to be clear, it's the potential user who makes the application for a consent. It's not us. We have a full docu-pack, and Tony has worked with many people on this, so we work with you, but we need a potential user who invariably has a site that they can give the drainage map of that location. So we are very happy to work with any potential user, and even if you've got a consent, it doesn't mean you have to do it. It's just going through that approval process. So we would happily work with anybody in Anglia to do that.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you guys. One more on water, one from Rory. What is the volume of water required for the process to complete?
So the volume of water used varies depending on the size of the deceased, but we generally say between 1,200 and 1,400 litres would be there or thereabouts. We do recover a lot of that water to be used in the second process. So we use some water for cooling, which is recovered. But if we were to say 1,200 to 1,400 litres would be the average.
And when we say recover the water, we recover the water for that process. We don't, as yet, recover the water from that resomation. So everything associated with one deceased goes into the treatment tank and then goes into the drainage system. So we don't reuse the water for further resomations. It's something we would like to do, but we don't believe the sector are ready for that as yet. But to be truly environmental and really reduce the impact, we feel this is a way that it should go. And if we're working with other technology providers to look at a simple water reuse system that can take out the necessary filter accordingly to reuse it properly.
Awesome, thank you. Julie, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. Is there a possibility of using things like reed beds for cleaning the water rather than it going down?
Yes, and we've worked with a few clients on that. The challenge there is you then become under the responsibility of the Environment Agency, and so they would then get involved in understanding what it was about. But it has to be a decent sized reed bed, but it's certainly an option, and we again would be pleased to discuss that with people. I think up until we had this study, which was just before the pandemic really, well, when we were getting the results was, we didn't have sufficient detail about the profile of the liquid, so we hadn't engaged with the Environment Agency fully by then. At that point, I think now would be appropriate to do that. But it's a great option, certainly considered.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, from a practical point of view, thinking about space and the facilities that folks have got in place at the moment, what is the footprint of the equipment and how much room is required for each installation?
So the equipment can be broken down into a few modules, if you like. So the resonator itself, you need an area that's going to be around about, the resonator itself is 2 meters wide by about 5.5 meters in length. Now that gives you the space at the front of the resonator for the loading area. So that's often something that's overlooked. Now, depending on what size system you actually go for, there's going to be a tank system that's going to be associated with that, and also a steam generator. So the tank system tends to be around about 4 meters by 2 meters, a rectangular skid, but that can be broken down into smaller components depending on what the facility is like. So we fully appreciate that not everybody has that large open space to put a piece of equipment in, certainly not an existing chapel or crematoria. So in addition to the tank system, there then would be a steam generator of some description. That an electric unit is about 1 meter by 1 meter footprint. The gas unit would be about 1.5 by 3 meters in footprint. So there's a few relatively large components, but put together, it doesn't take up any more space than a full cremator with an abatement system on there.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys for that. Okay. Well, that's in terms of what's coming from the group. From the audience, that's I think we're there or thereabouts. I guess from my point of view, guys. Clearly, there's a appeal on an international level, and you've got this thing in action. Have you done any kind of research in the UK as to consumer attitudes and so on? Any research, any indications on?
Yes, and I do apologise that there was a slide which I think I probably skirted over, but we've done some. and other people have done some for different reasons. And what tends to come back quite consistently is about 30–35% of the public, with little knowledge, bearing in mind, say they would be either very or interested in this option. And so that's the general benchmark we give. Now, again, if 30–35% of the public who are cremated selected this, that'll be a significant number, significant number. So, you know, yes, 70% of the people are not saying that, but I think for a process which is little understood and in an area where generally people do not understand, do not engage, do not talk about cremation, I think that's a pretty strong statistic.
Right.
I think if you put that into the context of when cremation was not first started in this country, because it's a very ancient form of disposal, but you know, if you look at sort of the turn of the 20th century, you know, it took cremation a very long time to become more popular, didn't it? So I think you're probably ahead of the game on that one, actually, Howard. So don't despair.
I hope so. Yeah.
Good. And what final one for me? Just an apologies for my ignorance, guys. Is this your own patented process, technology, equipment, or is this a process and a service that's provided by other organisations around the world, or is it something you've created?
So alkaline hydrolysis, I think it's something like 1880 or something.
Yeah, it goes back
was first performed as a process. Okay. But it was through the efforts of Sandy Sullivan in the Mayo Clinic in around 2006 that it was really focused on. It's generally been on animals previously where it has been used, and it was only through the efforts of Sandy and a few colleagues at the Mayo Clinic that they really focused on human disposition. So the process itself is not patented, but there are certain features of our equipment which make it work for human disposition that are patented. And those are the areas that we have. Now, there are one or two providers elsewhere in the world of differing degrees of technology. So it is feasible elsewhere, but only one or two. And when you think of the number of cremator manufacturers in the world, then there's an awful lot to go before we get there as a mature technology.
Okay, brilliant. Well, that's honestly, guys, that's been very interesting, and thank you for fielding so many questions. You really did. You had a run of them there. So there's you can see from the size.
As I said at the beginning, I welcomed it. That's what we want. You know, it's very fantastic. We do thank everybody for spending the time coming and listening and taking an hour out of your day, but also then coming forward with the questions. Very much appreciate that.
Well, brilliant. Well, listen, thank you for your kind contribution to the series of webinars. So thank you guys very much. Julie, anything before we wrap up?
Just thank you both very much for your time as well. It's been really interesting. And our next webinar is going to also feature an alternative to burial and cremation. So you might want to join that as well. We're going to be talking about precision organic dispersal. Very good. Well, if it moves the centre of gravity across from current methods, then we've all got to be pleased, because it's all of our responsibility to sort this climate mess out, isn't it? Indeed. There's never been a more important time to do that. So, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Gentlemen, thank you both again. Very informative, well delivered, and thank you for making the time, and very best wishes with the development of your offer, and we will hope to speak to you guys again soon. Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
Bye everyone. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye.